And a lovely good morning to you. So how about this? It's actually a pretty good weather today for a change. Sadly, it's a weekday, so on my way to work. And I figure if I do want to make this an endeavor to record interesting things and have a record of things that I can look at in the future and find some laughter out of, I should actually make a habit to record these videos on a consistent basis. I've just been way too lazy to do it at home, so I figure I'll do it on the road, and hopefully this will increase my productivity a little. And today there's something I'd like to get off my chest, and it is related to what happened over the weekend. Over the weekend, the US, along with some of its allies, bombarded sites of supposed chemical weapons manufacturing facility in Syria. But don't worry, for those of you who are politically minded and have an opinion on this, I am not going to deal with it at all. Instead, what I want to talk about is the idea of 24-hour news cycles. This operation was carried out on Friday night. We all heard about it on the news that this strike was going to take place, but it was a Friday night. So when we heard about it, we were thinking, oh, what's going to happen next? How is the stock market going to react? How are the people there? But it was on a Friday night, and nobody was working on Saturday. So instead, news media had to rely on Twitter posts of people who were living in Syria and the images and the stories that they could tell in 140 characters. And I remember distinctly the feeling of wanting to know what's going to happen next. What are the reactions that other nations are going to have on this strike? But I kept refreshing the page, I kept flipping through channels on the TV. None of the news channels had any update. And that was when I realized something quite disturbing, actually, about myself and to a larger extent, the society. So as a society, we've been trained in a way to stay up to date on current news events, on geopolitics, on business. And in some way, this has turned us numb towards the actual underlying tone of all these messages. We no longer have the time to let the news settle in our minds and actually process it, and we're just looking for the next fix. Now, as far as I know, and please correct me on this if I'm wrong, before CNN, there wasn't this idea of a 24-hour news cycle. It used to just be you have your hourly news reporting or 30-minute blocks spliced into your regular daily program. So CNN came along and changed the idea of news reporting. They introduced this 24-hour non-stop news reporting cycle, and from there the monster just kind of grew all into its own. And of course, the situation hasn't really improved with the advent of internet. When we talk about news, it's not even news that are presented by reporters anymore. It's things like Facebook updates, it's things like Twitter, it's things like Instagram. We have all these constant stream of new information, be it good or bad, useless or useful. We just can't filter it anymore. It goes back to the idea of not being able to process anything. But now that I'm approaching the office, we shall continue this conversation in a little bit. Now, one of the things that our generation we're sort of known for is that we're constantly glued to a screen, be it a TV screen, a computer screen, our cell phones. We have been conditioned since we were young to always look for new information, to always look for updates, simply by extension of this 24-hour news cycle that began with our parents' generation. And for us, this constantly changing state of being, this idea of chaos that is so tangible for us because we're always getting new information about something. And I just want to state that I am not using this as an excuse to explain away all the negative things that our generation have come to be known as. But I like to think that a lot of things that people say about our generation, that we're lazy, that we don't plan ahead, that we're just looking for the immediate fix, that's because we can't plan for anything anymore. For our grandparents' generation, they can depend on some certainties in life because for them, life is in a way predictable. They sort of have an idea of, if I live my life this way and I follow these preset routes, in a way, their life would end up to be, decent. Because if we think about it, the American dream that a lot of people sort of have an idea of is based on stability. It's based on the reasoning that the world is stable and predictable. Because if you think about it, since the Second World War, so our grandparents' generation and their parents' generation, they've been through this major change in the world that they live in. And from that point on, all the governing ideas are based around how do we bring stability into our lives? How do we make sure that the ups and downs are not so extreme that people can't anticipate it and they suffer because of it? Between Second World War and I would say up to about 1960s or so, 1960s, 1970s, it's about moderating everything. Things have to be, again, for repetition's sake, predictable. Things have to be stable. But for our generation, with a 24-hour news cycle, with the internet, with Twitter, with Facebook, you can't expect things to be stable and moderate anymore. All the flow of information, you can't control any of that, because with the convenience of smartphones and the internet within your arm's reach at any given time in your day, being bombarded by information is the price you will have to pay. You can't just turn it off, because if you turn it off, you give up on so many other aspects of your life. Can you imagine a modern work environment today where people don't use email? That is just impossible. For our generation, having to deal with this means that our coping mechanism is to acknowledge that chaos is the basis of our lives now, and that there's really nothing we can do to anticipate what is coming down the pipeline. And when you take away that ability to anticipate the future, to plan for it, and to prepare for it, then it really is detrimental to how we live our lives. And again, I just want to reiterate that I'm not using this as an excuse. I'm just stating this as one of the possible reasonings behind why my generation has such a bleak look on life. Now, do I think that this will doom our generation and the future generations to come? Of course not. This is a challenge, and I'm very sure that at some point, we as a society will figure out ways to combat all these negative aspects of this information bombardment. Because at the end of the day, this is a transition. Because let's face it, if we accept the notion that this coping mechanism of accepting chaos as part of our lives and not doing anything about it is the only solution to the problem, then we as a human race will just be eliminated at some point in the future. If we follow this path of logic, the ultimate outcome is that there's nothing that we can do and have no motivation in life. So that cannot be a sustainable way for the human race to advance. That is not how we as a human race have dealt with all the problems that came to us before. I am still hopeful. I am still looking towards the future with a certain level of expectation for the better. Just because of all these negative news that we see every day, it is not the ultimate say in the direction that we as a human race will progress. Just look at all the amazing achievements that we've made throughout the human history. We developed different methods of governing to bring order to society, to create harmony among different competing interests. We have all these amazing breakthroughs in science and technology, curing diseases that 20 years ago people thought were incurable. And the study of philosophy, where we examine the human condition and try to quantify what it is that makes us us. And we have all these amazing feats, and I refuse to believe that having accomplished all that, we're gonna be defeated by a small screen with a few lines of text that tell us something happened in this corner of the world that I've never visited before in my life is going to somehow make my existence inconsequential. No, that is not how I want to go out. I think this is a good place to end today's session, and I would say, yeah, this is pretty therapeutic for me. I have the opportunity to get something off my chest, and thank you very much for listening. And on that encouraging note, thank you very much for watching. Signing off.